What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only legend of winning, aka Low, and I'm back with another episode of the NBA preview. Now, for everyone out there who missed the last episode, as always, there will be an annotation in the top right hand corner, link in the description. And if you want to catch up on every single last video in the NBA preview, if you watch this video in its entirety, at the end there will be a playlist that can link you to all the episodes so you can catch up. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Denver Nuggets and the possibility that many people might be overstating how good this team could potentially be. But first, let's start out on a positive note, because last year the Denver Nuggets were probably the biggest surprise in the NBA. A lot of people suspected this organization to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. However, towards the end of the season, they were fighting for a playoff spot. Now, unfortunately, they got left out of the playoff race, but it definitely left something for the Denver Nuggets fans to cheer for. A lot of people are looking forward to this upcoming season for the Denver Nuggets because there's a lot of promise and potential on this team. Young guards such as Murray, Moody, and Harris are supposed to take that next step in their development. Wilson Chandler is now a starter after losing Danilo Gallinari, and obviously, and I'm not gonna try to beat around the bush, everyone is really just expecting for Jokic to play at an elite level, because towards the end of the season last year, that's basically what he was doing, putting in ridiculous numbers and really, again, just having people in surprise. Now, with all that being said, and actually speaking of our young guards and the potential of what's going to happen with this team, that actually leads us to our summer of social media.
I forget who it used to be. There was a commercial. We make money the old-fashioned way. We earn it. We're going to let our point guards earn that job. We're going to let our point guards earn the backup minutes. And I'm looking forward to that. I mean, you go back to last season, Jameer was our starter, Jamal was our backup, and Emmanuel was third on our depth chart. It's a race, it's a competition, and I look forward to seeing these guys starting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, fighting for that. And it's a great problem to have.
Shout out to Coach Mike Malone, a huge fan of his, especially back in Sacramento, but Sacramento's a trash organization. That's really the only reason why he got fired. However, Mike Malone is alluding to a big problem, but I guess a good problem to have with his organization. The amount of depth that they have at that point guard position is something that's extremely alluring. And honestly, I don't necessarily think that they should have a definitive point guard. You can just run as many guards you want on the floor with one another, and I think that's fine. However, that is something that I think a lot of people are debating who exactly is going to be the starting point guard. As of right now, I would assume Jameer Nelson, because it's going to be really hard for me to think that Emmanuel Moody finally earned that right, especially because he's not that good of a shooter. He doesn't space the floor out whatsoever. But then by the end of the season, I can definitely see a backcourt of Moody and Harris. But with all that being said, because I'm really just jumping ahead of myself, let's actually just look at the depth charts and the contracts so you get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. Looking at the contracts, the Denver Nuggets decided to bring back Plumlee, which is a very interesting decision, but it is what it is. 3 years for $41 million. Then they brought in Paul Millsap for a 3-year, $90 million contract. With that being said, Paul Millsap, even though I love Paul Millsap and the way he plays the game of basketball, he is a bit overpaid. Paul Millsap receiving $31 million this next upcoming season is a bit much, especially because of his age. But with that being said, you got to balance the highs with the lows, and Paul Millsap is a really solid defender, and that's the biggest reason why they brought him to this team. Great defender, nice passer, high basketball IQ, and a veteran surrounded with a whole bunch of young players. Now, when it comes to expiring contracts, our two veterans are Will Barton and Jameer Nelson, and then when it comes to Jokic and Harris, they are on their rookie contract, so they will be restricted free agents. And more specifically, when it comes to Jokic, they still have one more team option that they could possibly use. It will be very interesting to see what's going to happen in the upcoming months with some of these young players and the contracts, but as of right now, I really wouldn't think too much about it because, again, they still are restricted free agents. Now let's move on to our depth chart, where I have Jameer Nelson and Gary Harris in the backcourt, Wilson Chandler at the 3, Paul Millsap at the 4, and Jokic at the 5. Coming off the bench, we have a ridiculous amount of guards: Emmanuel Moody, Jamal Murray, Malik Beasley, and even Will Barton. Even though, yes, I put him at the 3, he's basically a guard, which again goes back to why I just put a whole bunch of guards out there. Who really cares? And also we have Kenneth Faried, Darrell Arthur, and Trey Lyles. When it comes to the depth on this roster, there's one word that comes to mind, and that is offense. Offensively, this team looks very thorough from top to bottom. Almost everyone can space the floor outside of Kenneth Faried, but that's neither here nor there. And then you have some players who are versatile and dynamic. So you have a player such as Paul Millsap, who can knock down a mid-range and a three-point shot, but also is a really good passer and defender. But when it comes to having versatility, being dynamic, and having a lot of potential, we obviously have to point out Nikola Jokic, which is why he is our spotlight player of the day. Nikola Jokic is a 6'10" big man that was selected in the second round of the 2014 draft, and I'm gonna just be completely honest with you, everybody was sleeping on him. However, last year he definitely put his talents to display, showed everybody how great of a player he is and how much potential he has to his game, and everyone is basically impressed of how great and well-rounded of a player Jokic is. When I talk about versatility, especially on the offensive end, that's basically the definition of Jokic. Last year, Jokic nearly averaged 17 points, 10 rebounds, and almost 5 assists a game while shooting 57, almost 58% from the field. But that was with him coming off the bench as well. If you just isolate the last 51 games that he played in the regular season, in which he was starting all of those games, Jokic was a 19-point scorer, grabbing 11 rebounds and 6 assists as a big man. Also keep in mind that Jokic was still very efficient, shooting well over 55% from the field, 34% from behind the arc, and 82.5% from the free throw line. Having shooting splits like that are extremely impressive, and also averaging 6 assists is something that is remarkable, especially for a big man. But that's not even the most impressive part, because as he averaged his 20 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists on great shooting splits, he did so in under 30 minutes a game. Offensively, Jokic was on a whole nother level. It was remarkable, it was sensational. In every single possession that he had the ball, it basically converted into easy points. And because of this performance from Jokic, a lot of people are expecting him to take the next step, and rightfully so. Jokic is still fairly young. Last year was only his second year in the NBA, and so we could only imagine what he could do moving forward, especially because now everyone on the team now understands how great of a player he is, so they should run the offense through him. Now, with all that being said, there's also some negatives that come with his game. He definitely has to work on his conditioning, because there is a reason why he was only playing 31 minutes. Keep that in mind. And then you also have the problem with Jokic not being a great defender. Some people may even make the argument that he's a liability because he's not even a rim protector. But with that being said, as a sophomore heading into his third year into the NBA, I'm expecting big things out of Jokic, and I'm hoping that he can be consistent and continue to develop his game, because there are holes in his game, and if he's able to fill those holes, I can see him being one of the premier players in the NBA sooner than later. Now, is that enough to push them in the playoffs? I guess that's what we have our Twitter question of the day for. Shout out to Klaus, I think that's Klaus Season. Shout out to Klaus Season. He asked, can the duo of Nikola Jokic and Paul Millsap lead the Denver Nuggets to a 6th seed? Now, let's pump the brakes real quick, because this is where people are just getting really out of hand. Now, I like Jokic, I like Paul Millsap, and I like a lot of players on this team. However, to think that they'll be able to jump from the 9th seed to the 6th seed just because they added Paul Millsap to this team and Jokic is going to have a full season of him being a starter is a bit ridiculous, because there's definitely other problems with this team. For one, they really and truly don't have a point guard. Yes, I know there's a lot of potential with some of those guards, but I still believe they're going to start Jameer Nelson. And even if they don't start Jameer Nelson, they go out there and have a backcourt of Murray and Harris, neither one of them play at an elite level. Their elite level players are in the front court, which in today's NBA may not be that conducive of winning. Second thing, when people talk about how great of a run Jokic had, yes, Jokic towards the end of the season, he was definitely putting up ridiculous numbers. However, those numbers didn't necessarily translate to wins all the time. For the most part, even when Jokic was starting and putting up ridiculous numbers, the team was still a 500 team, which is why they finished with a record of 40-42 last year. And speaking of their record and where they finished last year, having a record of 500, which is what the Portland Trail Blazers finished with, is normally not good enough to make the playoffs in the Western Conference, so it was a bit of an anomaly. So keep that in mind, along with the fact that the Western Conference has become significantly stronger. So to say that Jokic and Paul Millsap might be enough to push his team in the Western Conference, I do believe it's a bit of a stretch. But also keep in mind, and probably the biggest reason why I don't believe this team will make the playoffs, and yes, I just don't think this team is going to make the playoffs, is because they really didn't fix their biggest problem. Offensively, yes, you can make the assumption that players such as Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Wilson Chandler, Jokic, so on and so forth, that they will improve on the offensive end. However, that was not their problem, because last year they were one of the best teams in the NBA when it comes to the offensive end. The problem with the Denver Nuggets is what they lack defensively. And even though, yes, they added Paul Millsap to their team, Paul Millsap, 32, 33 years old, he was already slipping defensively in Atlanta. I just don't think he'll be that great of a defender, and quite honestly, he's never been this great of a defender to make up for what everyone else on the team lacks defensively. Because when you take Paul Millsap off of that team, there is no one else on that roster that anyone can comfortably say can play defense at an above average level. And because of that, along with the other reasons that I pointed out earlier, I just don't think the Denver Nuggets are going to make the playoffs. But also keep in mind, I'm splitting hairs here. There definitely could be some other issue that happened with other teams where the Denver Nuggets could squeak into the playoffs, or there's a possibility that the Denver Nuggets can kind of find their way on the defensive end and not be the second worst team defensively like they were last year, and maybe find their way into the 6th seed. However, if you're going to be optimistic about something that more likely is not going to happen, there's definitely other things in the Western Conference to be more optimistic about that has a better chance of occurring. But I will end out on a positive note. Shout out to the Denver Nuggets. You all have a lot of gems on your team, players that were slept on in the draft or through free agency, and you found a veteran in Paul Millsap who plays defense, who should be able to aid the progress and the development of some of the young players. I believe Gary Harris is definitely one of the most underrated players in the NBA because he was ridiculously efficient last year, and I hope and I believe that Jamal Murray will be the player that he's going to be. Emmanuel Mudiay, Kenneth Faried, but everyone else, I like this team. But let me know what you think about this team in the comment section below. Tell me what you think about Murray, Harris, Will Barton, Wilson Chandler, Kenneth Faried, and of course Jokic. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. And with all that being said, people, I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.